Welcome to the Thriving Farmer Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kilpatrick. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and celebrate sustainable farming. We believe that you can build a profitable, sustainable farm that gives you true farm freedom. Join us as we talk to farmers, innovators, educators, and entrepreneurs to glean their top takeaways in business and life. Hey, Thriving Farmers. Welcome to this episode of the Thriving Farmer Podcast with Michael Kilpatrick. Today's guests is Alessia McCobb and Virginia Winkler, who are the owners and farmers at Sound Pine Farm in Brunswick, Maine. The farm grows diversified vegetables for a 75-member CSA using organic practices. Sound Pine Farm is committed to making the CSA model work for members through their Free-Choice system, which allows for greater customization within the share and by providing members with an abundance of the highest quality produce. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to be here. Yeah, happy to be here.
So give us a little bit of an overview of your farming operation.
Well, we farm using organic practices, like we said, but we're not certified here in Maine at this point. We grow on about 2 acres that we lease in Brunswick on pretty heavy clay soils. Mm-hmm. But despite that, we're pretty lucky because our farming situation, there's already a well on the property. There was a tractor included in our lease that we are able to use, and we've had a lot of great infrastructure already available to us there, like a gravel road and a lot that made the first couple of seasons easier on us. We don't have a greenhouse there on the property, but we rent greenhouse space from a different farm a few minutes away. And yeah, we're growing most of the vegetables you'd expect to be growing, other than a few. And I'll hand it over to Virginia.
That sounded pretty good. We just grow for the Maine growing season, so our CSA runs from the beginning of June to the end of October, and then we shut down for the winter.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
How far are you outside of Portland?
We're about a 40-minute drive to Portland. So our members, I think we have one member that lives in Portland, but most of our CSA members are just in the immediate area in Brunswick.
Very cool. Yeah, I've been to Maine a number of times and always trying to remember where the things are. You're actually really close to the coast.
We are, yeah. We actually have access to the ocean from our farm property. We just take like a 5-minute walk and we can see the ocean. So we are right on the coast, which we have found, especially this season, has really helped mitigate the temperatures and the climate conditions a little bit. It's a little more temperate than inland Maine, which we've really benefited from. So
there was a frost last June 1st that a lot of Maine got hit pretty hard with, like down in the 20s. And we, thankfully, I think it was like 33 degrees on the farm. So it didn't have too much damage.
Wow. So talk to me about your background. How did you both get started farming?
Well, I would say Virginia and I both attended Cornell University, and Cornell has a great student-run farm called Dillman Hill. And we both got interested in Dillman Hill right from the start. Our whole friend group kind of just started going to Dillman Hill to volunteer because they had volunteer work parties there. And I think that's what really initiated both of our interest in agriculture. In 2011, I came to Maine, to Brunswick, to spend a month here because I have some family in this area, and my cousin was working at Crystal Spring Farm, which is here in Brunswick, as a crew member, and I did some days volunteering on that farm, and I just really loved it. And when I came back to Ithaca, I actually ended up becoming a student manager at Cornell's Dillman Hill, little student-run farm there. So that's kind of where my farming interest really took off. And I know for Virginia, she also really got started with Dillman Hill, and then she can take it from here.
I think in both of our lives, farming was kind of like woven in and out for a while. And then after college, we were both working at different farms. And I think we both separately really decided that we wanted to be farmers long term. so I was working in Maine at the time at Crystal Spring Farm, and Alessia was working at Merck Forest and Farm Center, and she ended up coming to Maine to work on the same farm that I was working. Yeah.
Very cool.
I had introduced Virginia to Crystal Spring Farm on a little road trip, and then she ended up applying there a few years later, which kind of was neat. And then she convinced me to come join her. And even though I did love working with livestock at Merck, I was definitely missing being, you know, in the vegetable world. So that's why I decided, sure, I'll join you at Crystal Spring, and here we are.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and Merck is more set up as it's a really different type of farm. It's not like it's really the production agricultural side of farming.
Right. I think I was very interested also in the farm-based education and environmental education world, and so Merck kind of marrying those two things for me. But I think that I found working with kids was draining in a way that I hadn't expected, and I was really missing being on more of a production farm. So that was also part of the reason that I ended up transitioning to that system.
Cool. So now when you say you're a seasonal farm, so you just do one for the CSA, does that mean, what do you do in the off season?
Well, that's kind of to be decided. Last winter, we both worked as servers at a restaurant. And I think that won't be happening this year. That's definitely something we are still trying to figure out, but I think we're not super drawn to what winter vegetable farming looks like. In Maine. There are a lot of like big storms that come through, and just dealing with things freezing and breaking all the time isn't something that appeals to us, and just being able to rest and reset and look back on the season is important to us. But so I think we both might long-term try to have some kind of off-season job. But we'll see. We're kind of open to the possibilities for now.
So let's talk about during the season. What does a typical day look like for you on the farm?
Well, hard to know what a typical day really is, but we try to stick to, well, we're trying to work on having like a schedule. But right now, Virginia and I are actually roommates, so we, you know, kind of start the day as soon as we're both up in the morning. We meet at the kitchen table and start kind of planning out the day and, you know, talking about what seems feasible. Obviously, driving to the greenhouse is always at the beginning of our day, which is certainly something that adds a lot of, you know, having an off-site greenhouse. While it has pros and cons, because one of the cons is obviously that we have to drive there multiple times a day, and even if it's only a 10-minute drive, it does, you know, add up over the course of 3 checks on a hot day, for example. On the other hand, it's a great resource to share, and we aren't responsible for the furnace. Yeah. Which is or the other infrastructure. But, you know, then we come back to the farm, and depending on, it really depends what we're going to do that day, whether it's going to be, you know, a planting day, weeding day. Obviously, we have two CSA pickups a week. One is on Monday from 3 to 6, and the other one is on Thursday from 4 to 7. Those are both currently being held at the farm. Normally, we would hold the Thursday pickup at this brewery downtown, because we like that as like a convenient sort of meeting spot for to not have to come out to our farm. But, you know, with COVID and everything, we're doing both pickups at the farm right now. So Monday and Thursday become completely harvest days, other than the pickup hours, obviously. And then harvest does tend to spill over into other days as well. We'll often bunch roots on the day before pickup, or, you know, tomatoes and cucurbits will be on days that aren't during our regular pickups as well. But it's definitely a little bit hard to determine a typical day.
Yeah.
You know, it's just sort of one task after another. We'll often divide and conquer. We don't have super clearly defined roles, and we like to have a lot of variety, but we'll often, you know, go our separate ways on the farm and each tackle a task, unless something is really going to get done better together, in which case we'll work on it together. And we also have like unspoken, you know, we just sort of like fall into, okay, you'll do this part of setting up for planting and I'll do this other part. It really works well that we've worked together.
Yeah, like
years.
moving tarps around is always a 2-person job.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about the role separation, because you mentioned that a little bit. Is there been a task that one of you like gravitates more towards, and do you ever fight about, you both want to do something?
It's funny, when we decided to start the farm, we took a beginning farmer course, and so many times people warned us that it was really important to have really clear separate roles. And we haven't really found that to be true for us. For a few tasks, we have kind of like organically fallen into them. Like Alessia is our website guru. I am the QuickBooks guru. Guru might be too strong of a word for that, but I do the QuickBooks. Same with the website. And like I have kind of like taken over the responsibility for irrigating, but I think something we both really love about farming is the diversity in tasks that need to be done, and we just like to do everything, and so far it's worked out. I think often we'll be like, do you want to do this task or this task? And we are just kind of honest if one of us does have a preference.
It's awkward when neither of us has a strong preference, although I do feel like often we sort of do, and we kind of know.
We can tease it out.
Yeah.
But so far it hasn't really been an issue to have separate, clear roles.
Yeah. We're like, honestly, if we both really want to do something, we'll often just do it together, even if it's slightly less efficient. We're just kind of like in that really flexible space on our farm at this point, where it's like, yeah, we both, want to do this task. Seems a little fun. Probably one person could do it, but we're just going to divide it in half and both work on it.
Now, how many years have you been doing the farm?
This is only our second season on our own farm. We've now worked on farms together. This is our 4th season, managing together, essentially.
Now, do you feel that background has been important of you being able to work together on another farm and just that experience in managing?
Definitely. I think, so when we were managing Crystal Spring Farm together, which was a huge CSA farm in Brunswick, that was kind of like a really good, even though we didn't know it at the time, it was a really good tester for us to see that we could work really well together over a few seasons. And so we at first weren't thinking of starting a farm together, and we one day just kind of realized that we could, that we worked really well together, and that was super important. And we just felt like we could own a farm together happily.
Talk to us a little bit about the equipment you're using, the major pieces of equipment you have on the farm.
Well, we don't have a ton of equipment, but and the equipment is not necessarily a scale that we've chosen. Well, the main piece of equipment is a John Deere tractor that our landowners already had. Our landowners are not farmers by background, but they have been leasing most of the land that we're on to a livestock farmer, and have gotten pretty involved in the management of the cows and do a lot of the mowing as well. So the tractor was purchased really to manage the pasture. I think it's a 66 horsepower tractor, and it does have a few implements as well. So there was someone growing vegetables for 2 years before us, and she, with the landowners, kind of picked out a few implements that would be useful for vegetables. So there's no mechanical cultivation implements. It's just we have a rototiller, a bed former, there's a subsoiler attachment, and then there's a flail mower and a rotary mower. Am I forgetting anything?
It has a loader. We have a bucket on the front.
Nice.
Of it as well.
Nice. So it's a good basic setup then.
Yeah, it is a great basic setup, and we use them as much as we can. We'd like to do a reduced tillage method, but also we have these heavy clay soils, which last spring we basically formed and broad forked by hand because we couldn't really get in with the tractor early enough to have beds formed, but we've certainly used the tiller and the bed shaper in most of our bed prep once it's dry enough to do so. Other equipment we have, we use a lot of hand tools, a lot of broad fork use and bed prep rake, and we have a flame weeder from Farmer's Friend. It's the one that fits across like a whole bed. That's something that we're still kind of fine tuning. But yeah, I think as far as equipment, that pretty much covers it. Yeah.
Very cool. Now, I was reading your blog a little bit. New bed prep is pretty challenging because of the property history. Share with us a little bit about that.
Well, so the property is rather hilly. It's kind of like rolling, gentle hills with some trees in between the fields. And last season when we came onto the farm, it all came together really last minute, and we didn't even sign the lease for that property until January of the season that we were going to be growing in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so the farm had been left in a state that was, like areas had been tilled and bed formed the previous year, but nothing had been really like cleaned up and ready for the next season. So there weren't beds that were shaped and ready to go. There were still, some crops left in the field from the previous person who had been growing there. So our challenges were definitely like, okay, we've got to form beds and get space ready, but also it was a super wet spring and we weren't really able to get them with the tractor until June. So essentially all of our bed prep was by hand, and that was like broad forking beds, digging out aisles in order to just like create those raised beds, a lot of digging fork and rake action to break up the clods. Looking back at pictures of what the farm looked like, I just feel like we were crazy for doing that. I don't really know how we did it working. We're both working as well, but somehow. Yeah. Wheelbarrow compost, but the wheelbarrow would get stuck in the muddy aisles. It was a bit of a mess. And I think that we were so consumed by the work that we didn't even really take a step back to be like, wow, this is sort of nuts that we are turning this field of sod into our greenhouse, or our high tunnel location rather.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's always that bit of crazy that comes with being a farmer of any sort. So I think you're in good company.
Yeah. We thought this year, like, we could have never done that this year. Like, how did we do that?
Yeah. So let's move a little bit to like management. So as a farm, there's always endless tasks to be done. What systems do you use to keep on track of like what's the most vital to be done every day?
So we do a field walk on Sundays, which is like our beginning of the week, and go through to every field and make a list of what needs to be done. And then we'll go back and have kind of a meeting about it and figure out, like, with the weather and our harvest days, what days it makes sense to do certain tasks, which is definitely like subject to change. I mean, we probably never actually do everything that was slated for a day, but it definitely helps us like focus and not just run around the farm like chickens with their heads cut off, I would say. And I think it just makes us way more efficient when we are moving from task to task.
Now, do you use like any sort of app to track this, or is it all paper?
Just a good old whiteboard, which we love, being able to cross, just like wipe tasks off and see the board get cleaner by the end of the week. That's very satisfying.
Okay.
We use Google Sheets and Google Drive to keep track of other things, like our field plan and our field maps, our direct seeding plan, our greenhouse seeding plan. Those are all on Google spreadsheets that we can access from our phones. So we are often checking back at that stuff as well. Just don't do the actual task list on an app or anything. But yeah, we just love the feeling of being able to like wipe it clean and see how things are really getting reduced throughout the week. And I'd say that we are constantly reprioritizing and triaging tasks as necessary. It's kind of like an ongoing basis. Okay, it looks like it's going to rain tomorrow, so we better do these tractor things today, as opposed to pushing them off until, further down the week. So, but it's just an organic, natural process of changing priorities.
What would you say is the hardest thing you've ever done as a farmer?
I would say probably last spring. Our soil is so heavy that just like figuring out how to get plants in the ground and things to grow it was really a test for us if we could have a farm, I think. But I mean, we're also just going into our second season, so maybe the hardest thing is still ahead of us.
Oh, I'm sure it is. Well, we also made the decision to drastically reduce the amount of members we were going to take, because last year we had really kind of envisioned having far more than 50 CSA members, closer to 100 really.
Okay.
And the way the bed prep was, when we realized we had to make every bed by hand, we were like, you know what, we just can't do the plantings that we had counted on. We had seeded so much, we ended up just not even planting the majority of the seedlings that we grew because in the spring, because we just, couldn't really prepare bed space fast enough. And so we did make that decision to go down to about 45 members, and then we took some people through a wait list after that. And I think that was a really good decision. We just really couldn't have gotten everything in the ground at that. Yeah, that was definitely a challenging start to our farming career.
Who would you say would have been your mentors over the years as you started your farm?
I would say one of them was the first farm that I ever worked for. It's Plowbreak Farm in Hector, New York. And when I worked for them right after I graduated college, they were on lease land. They own a farm. They own land now. But I was kind of seeing them in the beginning stages of having a farm. They were like super encouraging, trying to teach me everything they could. And they also had a Free-Choice CSA system, which was the first time that I was exposed to that. And it was so cool to see when they would set up for CSA pickup. It was just this like mountain of vegetables displayed, and their members go through and just take whatever they wanted. And it just seemed like a really amazing system that they had set up.
I would say that we both also really feel that Seth Crack of Crystal Spring has been a huge mentor for us. We both started as apprentices on his farm and feel that his apprenticeship program was incredible because it was a real hands-on learning approach that gave us a lot more responsibility than other apprentices we've spoken to at different farms. Seth really had us doing all of the tractor work, managing all the different aspects of the operation. We would rotate roles as greenhouse manager, field manager, and harvest manager. And, just really the education that we got from that farm is just invaluable. And the number of things that we've taken and translated onto our farm from his farm is really countless. So we can, because he's still farming here in Brunswick, we are always kind of touching base, checking in, asking him, what he thinks about things. And the greenhouse that we rent is on his farm, and we have even, used his cooler when we have cooler malfunctions. So it's just a really great resource. He's been just really important to have as embarking on our own venture.
So talk to me a little bit more about the apprenticeship aspect, because I know that that's something that so many farms struggle with. I think you mentioned some of the stuff that you rotated the different tasks on there, but what other things made his apprenticeship program work well?
I mean, he took the time. I, at that point, was really into doing the tractor work, and he would pull me aside on days when he was fixing something on the tractor and just show me how to fix it, which I think is a really amazing thing for like a busy farmer to do. Both that took him more time to fix the tractor, but also he was like taking me out of the field to teach it. And I think he feels really strongly, I think an apprenticeship is abused a lot of times on a farm, and it worked well for him because he really lived up to what a mentor should be to an apprentice. And I think because of that, there was actually an apprentice before us who has a farm of her own now as well. And I think he really taught people how to be farmers, and that caused them to stick around for a few years. So it ended up benefiting him because he created these like really invaluable workers and managers for his farm.
Yeah. On that, in my first year as an apprentice, so I came on a year after Virginia, and I was working with people that were on their second season there. I mean, they had only done maybe the summer season as an employee, not the full apprenticeship season. But I essentially became a manager to people who had worked there, even multiple seasons, just because we were given, that was like a tool we were given. We were given so much more education, and we worked slightly longer hours, so we had, time where he was teaching us specifically, and the rest of the crew wasn't there yet. Just having that management responsibility, I think, really let us feel more comfortable in starting our own farm. And quite a few of Seth's past apprentices have started their own farms over the years. So it really seems like a successful program.
Yeah, there's a lot of difference between able to grow vegetables and able to run a farm. And I think that's what you get when you have a really good apprenticeship program, that, thinking about the whole week, thinking about how you have to set up projects for the crew and that sort of thing.
Yeah, totally.
So talk to us a little bit about, that first year. If you could have a redo, what would you have done differently that first year?
Oh boy.
And I think obviously, you said, well, I would have redone the beds. We'd have done the beds in the fall, but you obviously didn't get onto the farm and didn't have the lease signed until January. So you can't do that.
Maybe we could have been a little bit more structured with our time, because we really didn't practice our day structure as well as we're trying to do this year, because we were both working part-time at the restaurant as well during the whole season. So we would kind of work these like odd chunks of time, before 2 o'clock, when we'd then have to come home and have lunch, and whoever was like working their dinner shift would have to change for the restaurant shift. So we worked a lot of weird hours, and we ended up kind of working like all the time, even sort of late in the evening. Sometimes one of us would be at the restaurant until 10:30 or 11. It was hard because then in the morning you couldn't really get started as early. So we were a little bit all over the place, and maybe couldn't dial in some of our systems as much as we would have liked because it was hard to be organized. And so now this year we're really working a lot harder on just being, more structured with our day, and also dialing in these systems, like trying to get more cover crops in the ground and making our days more efficient, trying to be better about cleaning up after pickup, things like that, just to kind of keeping the ball rolling,
but not being in a craze.
But not just being in a craze where we're flat out working all of the hours that are in a day.
So really focusing on working smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yep.
Yeah.
With that, I'd like to stop here and take a quick break. In a minute, we'll be back with Alessia and Virginia from Sound Pine Farm. If you've been enjoying this episode so far, you're going to want to head over to growingfarmers.com/free resources and download our free resource bundle to help you shave hours off your week and become a thriving farmer. It includes resources such as our 10 winter growing secrets we wish we knew when we started, which is a ebook which talks about the tips and techniques to get better growth in your winter production. We teach things like the simple but counterintuitive principle that trips up most beginning growers, the shape and size of tunnels that are best for winter production, how to prepare beds so they are weed-free and get beautiful, lush stands of crops, what to do about pests like aphids, voles, and slugs, how to fast-track your research to fine-tune your production for your microclimate, and how to pack in more crops for higher yields and profits. So head over to growingfarmers.com/free resources and download your free resource bundle today. All right, folks, so I am back here with Alessia and Virginia from Sound Pine Farm. So let's talk a little bit about your marketing, because the first year you said you had about 45 and you put people on a wait list, and now you're at 75 shares for the CSA. How did you find members?
Well, so one really helpful thing was just reaching out to people in our community. So Seth Crack of Crystal Spring was actually transitioning out of a CSA model, which is part of the reason we felt like it was a good opportunity for us to jump into the CSA, because we were like, okay, well, here are a lot of people who are going to be looking for a new CSA in this coming season, and if we don't seize those people now, they're going to go off to other CSAs, and we're not going to, be able to get them as easy in the future. So that was a big kind of catalyst for why we started the farm. And Seth was definitely helpful in connecting us with people, because he had, a list of people that he kind of put in a little plug for us. But other marketing we did was probably using flyers and postcards in town. That was probably the other biggest way that we went about it. We flyered a lot downtown, printed a lot of postcards. We also wrote some press releases and sent those to different newspapers in the area. I think one or two papers did like a little, put our little piece in, which was cool. And then we also advertised to the Bowdoin community. So Bowdoin College is here in Brunswick, and we had a connection that could get a little about us in their sort of like faculty staff newsletter. Okay. We also took out a Facebook ad or two, which it was like $20 for a few days. And when we have people sign up, we ask them how they heard about us. And maybe one person heard about us from Facebook. But we do here for advertising, you kind of have to get people's attention a few times. Yeah. So even though people maybe didn't sign up because of Facebook, they might have seen us on Facebook or Instagram and then saw a flyer, decided to sign up. So we really just saturate Brunswick with our name, I think. We actually are friends with another farmer here who used to run a CSA, that's Milkweed Farm, and the owner, Lucretia, of that farm also, put in a plug for us, especially like in the local schools, kind of like put a little blurb in the newsletter. So, just all of those different ways that we might reach, particularly families, moms. We feel like those tend to be our the bulk of our customers, families. And,
But actually, spending $20 for selling one CSA share is still actually a really good ROI on ad spend.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you think about it, obviously it feels like you're probably full, and so you don't need to do a lot more of that. But, when you get to the size you want to scale that, I think that's still probably a very viable option for you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. This year we had actually ordered a bunch more postcards to start flyering, and then we almost didn't need to. We barely advertised at all this year because we had so many people, word of mouth, that signed up CSA. So I guess our really happy customers last season just told their friends about it, and it's pretty amazing how many people just said that they heard about us through a friend or neighbor or word of mouth. And then of course the coronavirus pandemic hit, and we actually stopped marketing altogether because we didn't really have anywhere to flyer downtown, but we filled up pretty quickly anyway. And the demand this season has been kind of crazy, I think, compared to a normal season. So we actually have quite an extensive wait list this year as well.
Yeah. Now you also were selling transplants too. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, that's kind of funny because we last year did this like tiny plant sale with our leftovers, and that was partnered with Milkweed Farm, our friend Lucretia. She had already been doing that little plant sale to this small community, this like small summer resident community. So we were like, sure, we'll just like throw some plants in and do that little sale. And then this year we were like, we should do another little sale, but we were going to hold it at her farm and just kind of scale it up a bit from last year, but it wasn't going to be anything too crazy. But then it became clear how much of a demand there was for seedlings this year. And so we, decided to ramp it up a little bit. And then ultimately we decided to move it to an online platform just because people were so impatient, and like they just just to get their seedlings. So we wanted them to know that they could, pre-order them. And then also just with coronavirus, we didn't really think it was going to be feasible to hold a plant sale the way you normally would. So we just did like this online platform, and it was a little crazy flying by the seat of our pants doing that volume of seedlings, but I think it ultimately was really successful. And we're going to do something a little different next year, but we'll have learned a lot.
So what would you say your top sellers were for the seedlings?
Sun gold.
Yeah.
Okay, sun gold tomatoes.
Definitely sun gold. We were surprised. Lucretia grew a lot of medicinals, and we did some perennial flowers, and there's actually more interest in those than we thought. I think people also really like Brussels sprouts, which we find kind of funny because as farmers on such a small scale, we would rather not even grow Brussels sprouts. So the fact that people are putting sprouts in their little garden seems funny, but people love Brussels sprouts.
Yeah,
a lot of the herbs really well, the culinary herbs. But generally I would say that I'm really, obviously the vegetables did well, but I was amazed at how well the flowers did. People just really want a lot of beauty in their life, I guess, this year. Hopefully all years, but.
Well, I think this year, especially for folks, was very tough. And I think it still is. I mean, still everything is just like crazy out there. And I think people just want to get back to the garden and the soil because it's incredibly grounding.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're sort of curious to see how it will go next season. If people are still going to be as interested in gardening, if people are going to be a little bit more food secure and not as worried about, growing all their own food. And so we'll see.
Talk to us about your Free-Choice CSA.
Well, we were inspired by Plowbreak Farm, who still run a Free-Choice CSA in upstate New York. And so the way it works is that we have people pay by their household size, and just counting adults, so anyone over 18, you would pay if there were like 2 parents and then a 19-year-old and a 5-year-old, they would pay for a 3-adult share. And then for the most part, when they come to pick up, they can take however much they need for the week. And so we do limit some things as they're coming into season. Like this week, we are limiting people to 3 zucchini per share, but then for most of the season, it'll be unlimited zucchini. And I guess there are a few reasons that we decided to do this type of share. One of them is efficiency on our part, just that we don't have to do all this like sorting and counting to make sure we have 75 of everything for everyone, because not everyone likes the same things equally. People eat. It's amazing to see the different quantities of vegetables that a same size household would take. And we really want people to be completely satisfied with the produce that they get from us and not feel like they have to go to the grocery store or the farmer's market to supplement their CSA share. That feels like it kind of defeats the purpose of a CSA. It's like really an amazing thing that someone in February says, yes, I am going to support this farm and give them $650 now and trust them to grow my vegetables for 20 weeks. That is like a really amazing thing that I think farmers kind of forget about sometimes. And so we really want to make it worth their while to give them that bounty that a CSA promises.
We also believe that, if you're going to have a share, you really are getting a share in the farm, and we want it to be your farm, essentially. If you are having some guests over for dinner, we don't want you to necessarily feel like, oh, you have to go to the grocery store that week to get some extra produce, because normally you just eat everything that you get in your CSA share with nothing left over. So, if you can plan for that, you can actually just take a little bit more at pickup that week. And we find between, the 3 adult shares, the 1 adult shares, the big families and the small families with all the kids kind of unaccounted for, it really evens out, especially like what Virginia was saying, where different family sizes or the same family size will sometimes take like vastly different amounts of produce. We sort of feel thins out, but it allows people to, you know, customize their share more and not take things that they would end up wasting. So we feel like it works really well to kind of meet people's needs that way. And also like what she was saying about not sorting, like for example, we just harvested zucchini, and in the past we've, you know, sorted zucchini so that everyone is kind of getting the same, you know, like all 75 members or whatever, however many members would get sort of the same amount of zucchini. So we'd be sorting like, oh, these are the bigger ones, and these are the smaller ones, and you'd get like 2 small ones for every 1 big one. But because of our free choice system, we don't do any of that kind of thing, because we just figure, here's the number. Some people will want the smaller ones, some people will want the bigger ones, and it just kind of, you know, works out. And even better if we don't have a limit.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you feel like, so during the distribution, will you run out of certain things and just people need to, if they wanted that, they should have gotten there earlier, or do you try to put a limit on those less available items?
We last year didn't run out of anything. This year, the first week or two, we had some adjusting, and I think ran out of like arugula for 2 members. But we start to kind of like learn and figure out. We keep track of what we harvest and what's left over afterwards, so we can see what people were taking. Like if it was an average of 1.5 kale bunches, so we always have extra of everything left over from, say, a Monday pickup, and then we'll give that out first on a Thursday pickup, so we don't end up wasting the extra. And we just make sure we have more available to harvest. But part of that is really kind of like studying what people took the week before.
Yeah, that would be fascinating data after a couple of years to be able to, you know, conglomerate that.
Yeah, it would. I mean, if we do think that we don't have enough, for example, we tend not to do huge Napa planting or Napa cabbage plantings. If we do something where we like do think we're not going to have enough for everyone to have an unlimited quantity, we will put a limit on it. You know, like, oh, if our first eggplant harvest isn't that big, because we don't want to run out of things that we do think that people will all want. But then, you know, come the second week of Napa cabbage, people don't really care about it as much. So, you know, if we have less of it, then we don't even need to put a limit on it, because we just know not everyone's going to take it that week. There's a lot of play in the system, and we, you know, do try to keep track of what people are taking, and it does seem like it would be a lot more over the course of the season than a CSA that specifically is only harvesting, you know, 1 bunch of kale for each member. But like we were saying, it kind of averages out. It's not any crazy amount more.
Yeah.
Overall,
And it makes it easy to, because I feel like there's certain crops, you know, people are going to like, and they're actually kind of easy to grow. And so it allows you to just grow those crops instead of feeling like you have to grow like 60 different crops.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we do a lettuce planting every 2 weeks, 100 bed feet of lettuce. And that is just like easy. We have a few varieties. You have to just weed it once before it's matured. And people take like 1 to 2 lettuce heads a week, we find. We also do very few loose cut greens, so we don't do a lettuce mix. We really just do like a spicy greens mix, which has sort of like a mustard kick to it, which we call our sassy greens, and our CSA members love the sassy greens. It's kind of like, it's like signature green for whatever reason. And then we'll do spinach and arugula in the spring and fall, but otherwise we don't do any other loose greens. We do a lot of bunching. So we'll bunch chard and kale, but we don't want to overcomplicate the system. So it's like, you know, we're not doing like a baby kale and a big kale. We're just doing the same kale consistently. We do dino and red Russian. But yeah, like you said, we've also eliminated some things that people just don't care that much about. We don't grow kohlrabi. We aren't growing celeriac this year. It's been too challenging for us. We're not growing rutabaga, you know, or really those purple top turnips. There's just things that, you know, if too few people are really excited about them, we're just not going to even put the effort in. Yeah.
Well, it's using the 80-20 rule and doing that for your vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So talk to us a little bit about, this is your second year. You've gone through a year. You've been a couple of years apprenticing on another farm. What do you feel is the biggest mistake that you see beginning farmers make?
Man, I don't know if we have the credentials to say what other mistakes farmers are making, but we'll say that something that was really important to us when we started the farm was trying not to go into debt, and we didn't want to grow too fast. We really wanted to make sure that we really have tight systems before we get any bigger. And it seems like some farms just kind of like snowball into having to buy equipment and take out loans and then grow more. And we just really wanted to make sure that we have everything in check before we get bigger. And we're really still figuring out our system, if we want to stay on this land long term or buy land. So the ability to remain financially flexible has been pretty important to us, and kind of be really methodical about how we grow the farm.
We also aren't trying to do too many different things. We really feel strongly about having the farm be CSA centric, and that is for a couple of reasons. One, because we feel like we can provide the best possible CSA if CSA is the main thing that we're doing. We're not giving what's left over in the field or what doesn't look quite as good for market. We're really just like, they are our focus and they are getting the top quality stuff coming out of the field. It simplifies our production systems in that we're not trying to grow crops for market, crops for restaurants, crops for CSA. We're really just doing those, nutritious and sort of staple vegetables. Nothing too fancy. We do provide vegetables for a small farm stand so that we have like a little wholesale account, but it really made sense with our, it's the folks who have the livestock on our same land, so we're kind of partnered with them, and it's a really easy account. But we feel really strongly about not trying to spread ourselves too thin. We don't particularly want to go to market and, on a Saturday morning and answer the same question 100 times, that kind of thing. So we just we really feel strongly about, especially as you're getting started, just like trying to do one thing and really well. Yeah.
No, that's good advice. That's great advice. Do you think there's anything that people should avoid their first year?
Wet spraying and wet soil.
What Alessia said is just kind of keeping it simple is really important. There's so much to figure out, and we're just at the very beginning, and I can't imagine trying to figure out how to run our farm and grow our farm if we had like multiple different enterprises. But we also realize that other situations are so different that other farmers might need to go into debt or need to have a few different enterprises. But
we were very fortunate that our area allowed for, had an interest in CSA. We have a lot of potential CSA customers here in Brunswick. Brunswick is definitely one of the more affluent areas in Maine, so a lot of farmers in Maine just don't have the option of having a bunch of people who can just upfront pay, $600 some for their CSA share for the whole season. So we totally understand that we have privilege that came with being in the area we're in, and also the fact that our farm lease came, with the use of a tractor and has some other infrastructure built in. That really made our start a lot easier.
Well, and yes, so you did have some advantages, but you also had some disadvantages, like your soil was really challenging to work with. And the fact that, yes, there was interest for CSA, I talked to so many farmers that say they feel like Maine is oversaturated with small farms, which I can disagree with, because I think that there's always room for good quality product. But but I think that's, I actually, I have told people if I have a farm that I would never buy a farm with clay soil. I just won't. That's just out of the question for me. So, kudos to you for taking on that challenge and running with it.
But you know what? It's been amazing. It's so just nutrient rich, and it holds on to moisture well, and Maine has been experiencing a few droughty summers. And so we actually, once it's worked, we really are so grateful to have it. It's kind of a catch-22. Clay soil is great and also challenging.
Well, and two, is you can get to the reduced tillage. The more you can do reduced tillage, the easier you'll be able to manage those beds.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's gonna work really well in your favor. So talk to us a little bit about the mental game for that first season, because I know that first year there's so many doubts, so many unknowns. Talk to us. Did you feel overwhelmed?
I think at the beginning, at least, we didn't really have a chance to feel overwhelmed. I mean, our heads were just down, and we were, we had this commitment to these 45 people. We just kind of like cruised ahead. I definitely remember the first planting we did of kale in April. I was putting the transplants in and thinking, like, we don't even know if these are going to grow. Who knows, like, what's going to happen? Are we going to have to refund all these people? But I don't think we really felt overwhelmed. And I think part of the reason is that we cut back our CSA to a more manageable size for our first year.
It almost feels more overwhelming now looking back on it, but I think at the time we just were so wrapped up in it that we weren't even able to like look at it from the outside and be like, wow. But just working so much, and I think it was like maybe the weekend of the 4th of July that it was such a hot day, we kind of like took our first few hours off. And went swimming. And this year, I think we're really trying to take a more balanced approach and be better about our schedule and just leave, some time for balance. And I think, and other things in our life. And in a way, like with all the current events happening, this season has felt in some ways more overwhelming. But I think that's just because trying to be in a good mental space with everything that's been going on has been more challenging. And then on top of that, we're trying to, keep a good reputation with our members. We want our new members to be happy. And I think that we do seem to think they're eating a little bit more produce this season because they're probably eating at home more and, not eating at work or going out to dinner. So trying to make sure that we meet everyone's expectations in the face of that has been, just another challenge, but.
That's actually a very good point, is that they're all at home now and they're not going out to eat probably. They're not going out to, I'm just trying to think, I think since March, my wife and I have been out to eat once.
Right. Yeah. And everyone seems to be maybe trying to eat a little bit healthier too, just to keep their immune system. Feels like the veggies are in high demand, which is great because we do feel like our CSA in being free choice and maybe having a slightly higher price point for a CSA in this area is really tailored towards people who eat a lot of vegetables. It can be a great if you are, really a vegetable heavy eater. So yeah, we're happy. We really encourage people to take a lot. It's just a matter of finding that balance of, do we have enough for people here?
Yeah.
Also say, being overwhelmed or not overwhelmed, we are part of such an amazing, supportive farming community here. We're journey people through MAFCA, and so they have all of these people there that are there to help us. And we can, if there was some pest issue with our eggplant, we can just send a picture to Caleb, and he will email us back within hours with an ID. And so there's a lot of hand holding for us here. And so anytime that in another situation would have been a huge problem, we had people to go to help us. When our cooler broke, we were able to use another farmer's cooler for our stuff. So we really have a community here that helps each other and takes care of each other, that combats, I think, the overwhelmingness of being a new farmer.
Absolutely, yeah.
Also, you were saying about Maine being saturated with small farms. I mean, in a way that also has benefited us greatly because Maine has an amazing, so MOPCA is the Maine Organic Farmers and Gardeners Association, which is a certifying agency here. But also they just have an incredible amount of resources and workshops, classes, you know, people available, the extension. It's just like, I think having so many farms has really benefited the farms.
Yeah. And they have a great farmer to farmer conference in the fall. I've actually spoken at that, which is, fabulous. So yeah, you're right. And I think, that Maine has a lot of farms, but it's the massive advantage. I mean, for us, when we were farming in the upper Hudson Valley, there was 25 produce vendors at the Saratoga market, but I wouldn't have traded that market for anything else because it was the number one market in the area, and that much brought in all the foodies. And again, if you have a good quality product, you're going to sell your product. So
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, some fun questions to wrap it up with. If you could pick one, what would be your favorite farming tool?
We sort of like joked about this, and we're like going back and forth. We're like, what is it? Our new dibbler? Is it our our flame weeder? But honestly, joking aside, we really feel like our favorite tool is our community. And that might sound really cheesy, but we feel like we rely on the community over and over again every day. We buy in certain crops that we don't want to grow. We from our neighboring farmers, we have like a really great beneficial mutualism going on with Milkweed Farm, where we're always giving her seedlings in exchange for, fresh peas or whatever it may be. And same with Seth of Crystal Spring. I mean, it's just really the community. We can't say enough how invaluable it is to have other farmers and non-farmers just in our, in our area that help us grow.
Do you believe that now is the best time to start a farm?
I mean, this year especially, there is a lot of demand for local food, but I think the biggest thing is just personally, you have to be ready to start a farm. And if whatever situation someone comes into, there is some kind of formula or answer out there for a successful farm that you can make, like wherever you are, whatever markets are there already. I think there is a way to have a successful farm.
Might not be easy, but hopefully there's the equation out there.
Yeah. What question do you wish I'd asked but didn't?
Oh boy. We weren't ready for that one. I guess we were really prepared to defend our free choice system more in terms of the value, because right now a lot of farms that have CSAs are either, getting out of the CSA because supposedly CSAs are in decline, or they're trying to find another way to make it financially justifiable. So we were really ready to answer questions about value.
Yeah.
And why.
Well, I've seen a lot of different models out there. I mean, you look at, let's say, from like Essex Farm, which has, full diet CSA. I've talked to all sorts of CSAs. So, yours is a little bit different, but I'm like, if it's working for them, I mean, obviously, the whole goal is that you're making probably a 40% margin in your farm. And if you can achieve, close to that, then that's fabulous. So obviously, after a couple of years, you'll be able to start looking back at your track record and your financials and see where your farm is trending, if that actually makes sense for you or not. So, yeah, I mean, that's the only thing. I love the model of not going to farmers markets. I love the model of just setting up twice a week on farm. Everyone comes out and picks up, and whatever you don't sell, you just put back in the cooler, or you leave in the cooler till 3 days later and you just offer it again. So
yeah,
I think it's fabulous. So yeah, I'm really interested to see how you scale this in the coming years, and what you do with the business. So
great. Us too.
So where can people find out about you and the farm?
Well, we do have a website, soundpinefarm.com, which we don't update super regularly, although we're going to try to get more of our newsletters up there. But we do have a mailing list, which we send out regular newsletters through, so that, you can sign up for that on our website. I would say that's where we're most consistent with updates. And we also do have a Facebook page and an Instagram. We're pretty good about posting on Instagram. That's Virginia. She's our social media guru. So
Okay.
those are the best ways to find out about us.
Yes, I was perusing that earlier, and my brother Jonathan was like, yeah, their CSA shares look so good. And I was like, yes, they do, but also realize you're in Oklahoma where there's very little good vegetables. So, yeah.
Well, his meat looks good. It's too bad we can't partner with them.
I know. Yes. I keep trying to convince him to come east. Hint, hint, Jonathan, if you're listening, I know you are. So, well, thank you both so much for coming on the podcast today. I know this is the middle of a actual work day, and it's actually recording this in the afternoon. So I'm sure you have a lot on your plate to go do. So thank you for coming on, but really appreciate it. And it was fascinating to hear how you are structuring your farm and just that whole startup journey. So yeah, keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Right, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, Thriving Farmers. Next week on the podcast, we will be joined by Michael Jordan, who's the CEO of a bee-friendly company. He will share all about how he got started with bees. He'll share why every single farmer should have bees, not only for pollination, but also for the many ways that you can profit off them. And he'll share how he got started with education in the school systems using bees and how those programs had incredible success. So can't wait to have you join me next week to listen to Michael Jordan share. So there you have it, another episode in the books. So I'd love if you would hop on over to iTunes and leave us a rating and a review. Those mean everything to us. We love to hear what you're thinking. If you have a podcast guest that you can recommend, please pop on over to the Thriving Farmer Podcast website and leave us a review. That's thrivingfarmerpodcast.com.